Welcome, everybody. Again, happy Wednesday. Hope y'all are having a wonderful week. And we are back to our Bible study in John for the Word Wednesday. Welcome, Miss Teresa. Thank you for coming to join me. I hope a lot more will be coming in as we go. But let's go ahead and get started. We are on chapter 18. Indignities and Injustice. Getting started. If you had been one of Jesus' disciples, where do you think you would have been during his arrest and trial? What emotions do you think you would have experienced? That's a lot. What kind of emotions would you experience if you had been there? I think I'd be afraid, and yet wanting to do something to keep Jesus from being arrested and going through what he had to. Good afternoon, Miss Lisa. Welcome. And emotionally, I think it would be fear. Where would I have been there? Would have been during his arrest and trial. I would hope that I would follow. Even if I had a chance of maybe getting arrested myself, I hope that a part of me would have followed him, like John. John, I do believe, followed him. So that's something to look at. Let's get to setting the stage. The way to the cross for Jesus officially began at the Garden of Gethsemane. After praying for his disciples and for us in the upper room, he traveled to a small garden located on the Mount of Olives, and there prepared for what was to come by praying with such intent that his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down to the ground. In a few hours, he would be betrayed by Judas Iscariot and arrested. It would be during the arrest that Peter, who in trying to defend Jesus, cut off a man's ear. But during the trial that followed, 3 times Peter would be recognized as one of Jesus' disciples, and 3 times he would deny even knowing Christ. Jesus endured 2 separate trials. The first, the Jewish religious trial, began with hearing before Ananias, the father-in-law of the high priest Cephas. The details of the hearing are lost as John shifted his attention to his own experience with Peter and the followers of Jesus after his arrest. Ananias sent Jesus to Caiaphas and the Sanhedrin, who hastily assembled to give the appearance that they were doing what was legal. It wasn't. The Jewish leaders had no authority to execute a prisoner. They needed Pilate, the Roman governor, to issue that order. So they sent Jesus to him for a second trial as the Roman secular authority in the region. Each of the Gospels report that Pilate could not find fault in Jesus. John's Gospel contains the most extensive dialogue between Jesus and Pilate, but at the end the result was the same in each account. Pilate offered to release Jesus as part of a Passover tradition by the favorite Jews. The crowd demanded that he release a criminal named Barabbas instead. With this, the Jewish leaders received the verdict they had desired from Pilate, and the events would move quickly towards Jesus' execution on the cross. Exploring the task, the betrayal and arrest in Gethsemane. When Jesus spoke these words, he went out with his disciples over the brook Kidron, where there was a garden where he and his disciples entered. And Jesus, who betrayed him, also knew the place, for Jesus often met with his disciples. When Jesus, having received a detachment of troops and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, came there with lantern, torches, and weapons, Jesus, therefore, knowing all things would come upon him, went forward and said to them, "Whom are you seeking?" They answered him, saying, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus said to them, "I am he." And Jesus, who betrayed him, also stood with them. Now when he said that I am he, they drew back and fell to the ground. Then he asked them again, "Whom are you seeking?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus answered, I've told you that I am he. Therefore you seek me, let these others go their way. That saying might be fulfilled which he spoke, off of those whom you gave me, I lost none. Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. Excuse me. So Jesus said to Peter, put your sword in its sheath. Shall I not drink the cup which the Father has given me? Now, let's see what the first question has to say. Hey, Miss Julie, welcome, welcome. Glad you're able to join us. First question is, how did the detachment of troops accompanying Judas Iscariot react when Jesus first identified himself? And what do you think caused this reaction? They fell backwards. They fell backwards. And what do I think caused this reaction? I think the surrounding Jesus was power. And when he said it is he, that power around him was like, whoa. And then he had to say it a second time to get them to understand that I am the one you're searching for. They just couldn't, it was like they were almost blind. Yes, Jesus is power. They didn't know how to deal with it, so they fell backwards. And then asking again, they did take him. How did Jesus show concern for his disciples' well being one last time before he was arrested? See verse 8. So let's see. Jesus answered them, I told you that I am he. Therefore, if you seek me, let these go their way. Okay. How did he show concern? He asked that they can go their way. Okay. Peter denies Jesus. It's John 18:12 through 18. Then the detachment of troops and the captain and officers of the Jews arrested Jesus and bound him. Then they led him away to Ananias first, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was high priest that year. Now it was Caiaphas who had advised the Jews that it was expedient that one man should die for the people. And Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did the other disciple. Now that the disciple was known to the high priest, and went with Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest. But Peter stood at the door outside. The other disciples who were known to the high priest went out and spoke to her who kept the door and brought Peter in. Then the servant girl who had kept the door said to Peter, are you not also one of this man's disciples, are you? He said, I am not. Now the servants and officers had made a fire of coals stood there, for it was cold, and they warmed themselves. And Peter stood with them, warming himself. Question number 3. Calvinus believed Jesus' popularity posed a threat to Israel and feared the Roman authorities would tighten their grip on the nation if they sensed radicalism was increasing. How do you think that affected his feelings about Jesus' guilt? Verses 12 through 14. They detached the troops, and the captain and the officers of the Jews arrested Jesus and bound him. They led him away to Ananias first, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was high priest that year. Now Caiaphas, who advised the Jews that it was expedient, that one man should die for the people. So how did you think that his feelings about Jesus' guilt? He didn't want any problems. But why not kill one man and hopefully the following would disappear. They really were wanting them just to, let's kill this man. He's the leader of all this trouble. Let's kill him, and then we're done with it. They'll all just break away, and that'll be the end of that. The other disciple who joined Peter in following Jesus to his trial was likely John, the author of the gospel. How would you describe their actions that night? Do you think they were courageous, cowardly, concerned, or confused? Verses 15 through 17. I think all of the above. Um, they were courageous, the ones that followed him to the trial. Cowardly for the ones who ran instead of following. Concerned, I think, and confused. I think all of the disciples were confused. Um, I think let's just write this out here. I'm just going to put all the above and more. Jesus questioned by the high priest. Now the high priest then asked Jesus about his disciples and his doctrine. Jesus answered him, I spoke openly to the world. I always taught in synagogues and in the temple where the Jews always met, and in secret I have said nothing. Why do you ask me? Ask those who have heard me what I said to them. Indeed, they know what I said. And when he had said these things, one of the officers who stood by struck Jesus with the palm of his hand, saying, Do you answer the high priest like that? Jesus answered them, If I have spoken evil, bear witness of the evil. But if well, why do you strike me? Then Ananias sent him bound to Cephas, the high priest. I know I'm pronouncing these names wrong, and I'm sorry about that. I'm doing the best I can. Send him to Cephas and the high priest. Now Simon Peter stood warming himself. Therefore they said to him, You are not also one of the disciples, are you? He denied it again, saying, No, I am not. One of the servants of the high priest, a relative of him whose ear Peter cut off, said, Did I not see you in the garden with him? Peter denied again, and immediately the rooster crowed. What do you think Jesus answered Ananias in the manner that he did? 20 through 23. They struck him because of speaking to the high priest. He spoke to the high priest. And what they felt was a lie. And Jesus said he did nothing in secret. Whoops, I knew that was going to fall. Let's see if I can get this a little closer to the book. He did nothing in secret. And was in the synagogues. Teaching. Question number 6. A few hours before Peter was ready to fight for Jesus and die for him, what do you think changed Peter while he was in the courtyard? Hi, Beth. Welcome, welcome. What do we think changed in Peter while he was in the courtyard? I think he got scared. I think Peter got scared and was afraid what would happen to him if he admitted he was a disciple of Jesus's. I think it was all fear based. Fear of what would happen to him. Okay. Jesus questioned by Pilate. Then they led Jesus from Capias to the Praetorium, and was early morning. But they themselves did not go into the Praetorium, lest they should be defiled, that they might so that they may eat the Passover. Pilate then went out to them and said, "What accusations do you bring against this man?" They answered and said to him, "If he were not an evildoer, would we not have delivered him up to you?" Pilate said to them, "You take him and judge him according to your law." Therefore the Jews said to him, "It is not lawful for us to put anyone to death, that the saying Jesus might be fulfilled, which he spoke significantly about the death he would die." Pilate entered the Praetorium and again asked Jesus and said to him, "Are you king of the Jews?" Jesus answered him, Are you speaking for yourself about this, or did others tell you this concerning me?" Pilate answered, "Am I a Jew? Your own nation and chief priests have delivered you to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight so that I should not be delivered to the Jews, but now my kingdom is not from here." Pilate therefore said to him, "Are you a king then?" Jesus answered, "You say rightly that I am a king. For this cause I was born, for this cause I have come into the world, that I should bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice." Pilate said to him, "What is the truth?" And when he had said this, he went out again to the Jews and said to them, "I have found no fault in him at all. But you have a custom that says I should release someone to you at the Passover. Do you therefore want me to release to you the king of the Jews?" Then they all cried out, "Not this man, Barabbas." Now Barabbas was a robber. Okay, question number 7. How did the Jewish leaders answer Pilate when he asked them about the charges against Jesus? And why do you think they responded that way? Let's go back to 30 and 32 and see exactly what they said. 30 and 32 through 32. And they answered him, saying, "If he were not an evildoer, we would not have delivered him up to you." So we're gonna write that out. Evildoer. Would we have brought him to you? Question number 8. How did Jesus answer when Pilate asked if he were king of the Jews? He asked if someone had told him. Someone else had told him. Or, let me see. I want to find the exact wording, 33 through 37. Let's see. Yes, if you were king of Judah. Are you speaking for yourself about this, or did others tell you? Okay. Someone else have told him, or was he speaking for his own knowledge? And why do we think they responded the way they did? Let's see. Because Jesus' kingdom was not of this world. Reviewing the story. A night that would have been filled with indignities and injustice began with Jesus' betrayer, Judas Iscariot, invading Jesus' prayer sanctuary in the Garden of Gethsemane, accompanied by armed troops to arrest the Savior. Jesus was bound and taken to Ananias, where he was illegally questioned and assaulted. He was then taken to the Roman governor Pilate, who could find no fault with him, but sentenced him to death anyway to appease the Jewish leaders. Meanwhile, Peter, who hours earlier had vowed to die for Jesus 3 times, denied him, even knowing him. Let's read Matthew 26, 1 through 5. Let's get my Bible up over here. I'll move some stuff around here off the table. Matthew 26, 1 through 5. One through 5. When Jesus was saying these things, he said to his disciples, "As you know, the Passover celebration begins in 2 days, and I, the Son of Man, will be betrayed and crucified." Okay, it's 1 through 5. At the same time, the leading priests and other leaders were meeting at the residence of Cephas. I want to say Saphias, the high priest, to discuss how to capture Jesus secretly and put him to death. But not during the Passover, they agreed, or there will be a riot. So why do you think that such a large and heavy armed contingent went with Judas Iscariot to arrest Jesus? John 18:3. verse 3. Let me see. Then Jesus, having received a detachment of troops and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, came with the lanterns, torches, and weapons. Why? Why were they so large and heavily armed contingent went together? I always wondered about that. Why did they have to come in all strong? And I think they were fearful of what Jesus would do. Who might join with Jesus in attacking them? Or would the disciples join in with Jesus to let them know that no, this isn't happening? Basically, I think they were fearful of what could happen. In arresting Jesus. Question 10. John notes the other disciple with Peter, likely John himself, was known to the high priest. This disciple also this disciple was also allowed entrance into the courtyard. When he spoke to the woman at the door, Peter was also allowed to enter. What do you what would be the repercussions of the simple act of kindness? The repercussions of the simple act of kindness. Let's see. It says 16 and 17. Stood at the door outside, and the other disciple, who was known to the high priest, went out and spoke to her who kept the door and brought Peter in. Then the servant girl who kept the door said to Peter, "Are you not also one of this man's disciples, are you?" And he said, "I am not." In 25 through 27. Now Simon Peter stood and warmed himself. Therefore they said to him, "You are not also one of his disciples, are you?" He denied it and said, "No, I am not." When the servants of the high priest, a relative of he whose ear Peter had cut off, said, "Did I not see you in the garden with him?" Peter then denied again, and immediately the rooster crowed. The repercussions of that act of kindness by John was that Peter would deny Jesus 3 times. Okay? Question 11. How would you describe Jesus' demeanor when he appeared before Ananias, who was a powerful man among the religious elite? How does John show that Jesus was really the one in control throughout his trial? He stood strong. I believe that Jesus stood strong, did not cower or show that he was fearful in any way. There was no fear about him. And being of no fear, and not being able to find anything to charge him with, I think that's why they kept saying, they wanted to let him go. Pilate and all of them were like, let him go, let him go, let him go. But the Jewish religious leaders were like, no. So Jesus was the one who was really in control of the trials, because I think all of them, the priests, all of those involved in this, were afraid. They crucified him because they were afraid. The judges and everybody, the high priests and the governors and everybody involved, was because of fear. fear of the elite, the religious Jews, fear of the Jews population themselves. So that's what I'm going to put, is that it was fear throughout. Okay. And question 7. How did Pilate attempt to determine if Jesus was guilty of the claims the Jewish leader brought against him? What was his ultimate conclusion? All right. This is going to be question 33 through 38, verses 33 through 38. Let's go back there. Okay. Then Pilate entered the praetorium again, called Jesus, and said to him, "Are you king of the Jews?" Jesus answered him, "Are you speaking for yourself about this, or did others tell you this concerning me?" Pilate answered, "Am I a Jew? Your own nation and chief priests have delivered you to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If if my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight so that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now my kingdom is not from here." Pilate therefore said to him, "Are you a king then?" Jesus answered, "You say rightly that I am a king. For this cause I was born, for this cause I have come into the world, that I should bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice." Pilate said to him, "What is the truth?" And when he had said this, he went out again to the Jews and said to them, "I find no fault at him at all." How did Pilate attempt to determine if Jesus was guilty of the claims the Jewish leaders brought against him? All he heard from Jesus is that he was a king. He was a king, but not of this world. Pilate's ultimate conclusion was that Pilate found no reasoning for death, for his death. That's true, Beth. I am who I say I am. Applying the message, question number 13. Jesus retreated to the Garden of Gethsemane to seek his heavenly Father in prayer when he was feeling overwhelmed. What do you learn from his example? When do you go to pray? Where do you go to pray when circumstances threaten to overpower you? Where do you go to pray when circumstances overpower you or threaten to overpower you? I'll be honest, I tend to run to my bedroom. I'm one of those who will run in the bedroom, curl up in the bed, and start talking to God about it. For me, the bed is a safe place. My workroom is more of a workroom, a craft room, and so the bedroom is a very peaceful place for me. So that is where I go when I'm feeling threatened or overwhelmed. Now let's read Hebrews 4:15. Okay, let's find that right quick. Verse 4. Make sure. Hebrews 4:15. Okay. 16. This high priest of our understanding understands our weakness, for he faced all of the same temptations we do, yet he did not sin. Okay, why is Jesus the perfect person to talk to when you're feeling overwhelmed, when you have been betrayed by a friend, when you seem to be surrounded by enemies, or when you are facing extreme difficult circumstances? Because he's been there and done that. Should have put, say, been there and conquered that. Yeah, that's better. Okay, reflecting on the meaning. There are two lessons we must not miss when we're examining the trials of Jesus. For there, for in these trials, we will see a cross section of humanity today, especially in their response to the Lord. In Jesus, in Jesus's enemies, we see the weakness of wickedness. According to the Jewish law, an accused person who is not required to testify against himself. But this was exactly what Ananias had in mind when he required Jesus to appear before him under the cover of night. We also see that the pompous and sacrimonious nature of the Jewish leaders' sin when they take precautions not to violate Jewish law, even as they prepare to crucify the Son of God. As John writes, they led Christ from Caiaphas to the praetorium. It was early morning, but they themselves did not go into the praetorium, lest they should be defiled. In Pilate, we see the wickedness of weakness. Pilate demonstrated his weakness first in his refusal to face the issue. He questioned the Jewish leaders as to why they had brought Jesus to him. Luke tells us that when Pilate learned Jesus was from Galilee, he tries to pass the matter off to Herod, who held jurisdiction over that region. When Herod proved to be of no help, Pilate appealed to the Jewish custom of releasing a prisoner at Passover. He hoped the crowd would allow him to release Jesus, but instead they called for the release of the criminal Barabbas. Pilate also demonstrated his weakness in consistently making the wrong decision. He said he found no fault with Jesus, but ultimately he gave in to the pressure of the crowd and agreed to hand over Jesus to be crucified. He even dismissed an appeal from his wife to have nothing to do with this man, for I have suffered many things in a dream because of him. And this is in Matthew 27:19. The sign Pilate had placed on Jesus' cross, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews, suggested that he may have well recognized the truth. Journaling your response. How has God helped you to not give in to the pressures of other people when it comes to making right decisions? Think about that. Let's, journal it up if you feel the need to. And I am going to call it done. Thank you all for joining me today. I really appreciate it. We have got 2 more lessons to do, and we will be done with the book of John. This is true, Beth. This truth will set you free. And he has indeed. I will see you all again next week for the Bible study. Coming really close to finishing this up. So I will see you again then, and I will see you around the internet in different groups and places. Bye, y'all. Y'all have a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll see you next. Bye now.